this is the manufacturing session that we're hosting now, and we're going to start with Dr Dave Tudor, who's going to discuss MMIC, followed by Professor Clive Badman. And, oh, sorry, Professor Badman's going to do it. Sorry, I was told earlier it was the other way around, but hey, we won't go into that. So Professor Badman's going to start, and then Dr Tudor will come on and tell you a bit more. Questions can be asked throughout the session and will be taken at the end. Also, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions of them directly, as we'll be giving you their direct links, and also we'll be giving you a link to the presentation that they do today, which you can share around your own company. So thank you very much for joining us. This is our inaugural Global Showcase. So we're hoping it goes well and that we'll be able to attract you back in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alison. And good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to start this talk off today on collaboration in medicines manufacturing. Just for a bit of context, I've worked in the pharma industry for GlaxoSmithKline for 40 years before I retired last year. The last 5 years that I was with GSK, I shared my time with Strathclyde University, and I now work part-time at the university. But what got me into this whole area is collaboration and how we can work together. And that's become more of an acute picture, as I'm sure you're all aware, over recent years with the challenges that we have in healthcare, with escalating costs, aging populations, and a growing population as well. How do we match up to that picture in terms of being able to help through medicines manufacturing? The supply chain that we work on hasn't effectively changed that much over the last 100 years. There have been some tweaks, but not too many fundamental changes. And it has a lot of failings. In R&D, there are many challenges in terms of getting products into clinical trials in a timely manner and in a manner that is not terribly expensive. That's the challenge that we have. In manufacturing, commercial manufacturing, that we have huge inventories. I can say openly that GSK had an inventory of around about £4 billion when I was working with them. That's absolutely huge. What can we do to reduce that inventory and to make our processes more environmentally sustainable and to reduce waste? And that cycle time takes too long. From starting material to packed stock takes anything really from 12 to 24 months in terms of producing materials. And then, of course, it's got to be distributed. And that brings its own challenges, particularly if the supply chain is constrained and we end up with supply shortages. So I don't want to jump to give a complete answer straight away, but one answer to this picture is around continuous manufacturing versus batch manufacturing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on this afternoon. But the benefits, I think, are there for all to see in terms of continuous manufacturing. A greater than 50% capital reduction, huge reduction in manufacturing lead time, and a working capital reduction of about 85%. And I'll let you read the other numbers on there. But in terms of space, we're moving from several floors in a manufacturing plant to just one relatively small room where material can be manufactured. So that's a quick glimpse of an answer. Where I started on this journey back in 2011 was with the creation of a collaboration between industry, academia, and government. And we formed a collaboration called Continuous Manufacturing and Crystallization. So we were particularly interested in the way that API crystallizes, so that when we come to formulate, we have a constant and reproducible form of material all the time for formulation. The program has been very successful. It's in its 8th year at the moment. In the first 5 years, it raised around about £150 million in cash. We've just started the second 7-year term, and we have somewhat over £50 million in cash and in kind coming into that program, with 8 tier 1 companies. You can see them across the bottom of the slide: AZ, GSK, Novartis, Bayer, Lilly, Takeda, Roche, and Pfizer. But with 7 academic institutions in the UK, and then links into MIT, into Purdue, into Rutgers, and into the University of Graz in Austria. And it's a program that's looking at fundamental research. So it covers TRLs 2 to 4. It's looking at creating skills to support continuous manufacturing. But most importantly, it's aimed at translating fundamental research into applications in industry. CMAC's national facility is based here at Strathclyde. It's a dedicated research facility with some absolutely unique capabilities, and just over 100 staff working in this area at the moment. So, I won't say too much about that because it's at the fundamental end of things, but I will say that from 2000 to 2010, the industry spent about £1 billion developing continuous manufacturing. And they spent that money in silos. So GSK spent 100 million, AstraZeneca about 80 million, Pfizer about 100 million, Novartis spent over 100 million, and the same again if you go into MSD and J&J. And in that time period of spending $1 billion, not one company got a return on that investment. So the intent in setting up CMAC was to bring companies together so that we could collaborate and we could leverage the funding through government investment and through shared programs of work. And doing that on the platform for continuous manufacturing started very, very well. 2 years into that program of work in 2013, we had a chance to put together another collaboration. It was an advanced manufacturing supply chain initiative, and we gave it the name of REMEDIES. It's a shocking acronym for reconfiguring the medicine's end-to-end supply chain, but just think REMEDIES. It had 2 tier 1 pharma companies, 2 institutions, and a further 19 small, medium, and large companies covering the whole supply chain. And it was a program 50% funded by the government. So industry put in almost £12 million, and the government gave £11.5 million against that. And again, it was looking across the whole supply chain, so finding agile ways that we could carry out supply of clinical trials. It was looking at continuous manufacturing of API and the translation of that API into a formulated product through continuous manufacturing. It was looking at using chiral amines in a continuous arena. And then a somewhat slightly different project looking at the use of supercritical fluids in terms of particle engineering and controlling particle size. So those were really the process projects. There were 2 packaging projects, one looking at new packaging materials and the other looking at printable electronics. And indeed, as you'll see in a moment or two, the development of an app as opposed to a patient information leaflet. And then we wanted to look at how we could reconfigure the supply chain, particularly using digital technology, in a way which reduced the CO2 footprint and the water usage and was patient-centric. And then finally, reimagining the last mile patient logistics. So a very broad program, spread over 4 years, remarkably successful in terms of the project success that we got out of it. And I can show some of those successes now. If CMAC was fundamental research covering technology readiness levels 2 to 4, then REMEDIES really took over and covered levels 4 to 7. So a typical valley of death area that new projects and processes and companies go through, in fact. But some of our successes, we've developed some wonderful new continuous processing equipment with immediate commercial applications. So, and those units are being sold and sold successfully at the moment. One of them for a high pressure hydrogenation system is in use in France. We have constructed here in the UK a GMP supercritical fluid facility. This facility was going to be built in China, but we managed to, with the funding that we had, attract it back into the UK, and it's been incredibly successful at manufacturing controlled particles for API and reducing the need for excipients as a result. And we've, as a late starter to the program, it started in year 2 of REMEDIES. We started some work on the use of enzymes in flow and how we could commercialize that. That's been successful, but it's not at a stage yet to be fully commercialized. It needs a little bit more work to be done on it. And we did have a very successful program on continuous direct compression and hot melt extrusion capabilities. You'll hear a lot more about continuous direct compression this afternoon. Just to say a word or two about hot melt extrusion or even just paste extrusion, it seems to me that there's an enormous opportunity here in the world of clinical trials. If we can get a comparison in a trial to compare an existing formulation with an extruded and 3D printed formulation, the extrusion and 3D printing allows you to get into the clinic in an extemporaneous fashion within weeks, as opposed to the 6 months that normally takes for developing a standard formulation. And that's an exciting piece of work I think we need to follow up on as well. So we've been looking at shorter production cycles and volume flexibility through continuous. And we believe that the reductions that we've demonstrated in continuous direct compression are worth at least £10 million a year to a single company. So we had 2 companies look at this, and that's the answer they've come up with. And you'll see why they've chosen to industrialize this particular technology, moving into the second part of the talk with Dave. Also, we did some work on filtration and washing, producing a continuous drug filtration unit. I've talked about CDC and hot melt extrusion. In the packaging area, there hasn't, to my knowledge, been a new packaging material developed in the last 20 years. And we're so dependent upon aluminium packaging for restricting moisture ingress. But we did look at one particular coating process that allows us to improve the barrier by 10-fold and bring significant savings in terms of material costs, carbon reduction, and particularly in distribution costs, because we're minimizing the size of the pack. And then we've looked at smart labeling and the packaging that comes with that. So we've developed a unit that you can put on a container which will measure temperature, humidity, and more importantly, location of your medicines. And that's a real challenge, not just in the clinical arena, but in the commercial arena, in understanding where products are in the world. Commercialization of that smart label is underway at the moment with a leading packaging manufacturer. The other thing I want to talk about in a little bit more detail is the development of a just-in-time automated pharmacy. Specifically, we started this work looking at clinical trials, but it is equally applicable in the area of personalized medicine in the commercial arena. So in REMEDIES, we managed to design a prototype, and in fact, you're going to hear more about this from Dave in a moment or two as one of the grand challenges that's gone into the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre. The savings on this automated pharmacy are estimated if you have a really slick clinical program with minimal wastage, and not many companies are like that, then your saving is at least £10 million a year. If you're not as slick, and perhaps you've got wastage in the area of 75%, then this could be worth up to £100 million per company per year. And the big bonus is that you reduce the time to produce clinical supplies from 4 to 6 months to less than a week. And that, of course, enables you to delay manufacturing if you haven't got a positive end of phase 2. And quite often we don't have, before we go to make phase 3 materials, we make them at risk. And if you get a negative end of phase 2, then that money is wasted. So it's a big opportunity. And there's nothing new in it. It's using existing technology, robotic technology. And we've got a couple of pictures on here that just show the sorts of things that we're planning to do. But picking up a bottle, ensuring it's clean, packing product into it, putting a desiccant in, labeling, patient-specific, and all of this done on a flow-through robotic system that can run 24 hours a day and with more than one product operating at the same time. And we've spent a lot of time, particularly with the Medicines Agency in the UK, the MHRA, talking about how this can work in a GMP environment. And it's a very exciting opportunity, I think, for making a significant cost reduction in the manufacturing of clinical trials, but also commercial materials. I've said most of that already. We've looked at the patient information leaflet and how we can turn that onto an app, and we've done a demonstration of that back in 2017, which gets rid of the challenges of small print, which are a bit of a challenge to me with my eyesight these days on labels. But with your iPhone or whatever, your Samsung, you can increase the size of the print, change the language, and so on. So that's been done. There were some near-term extensions which we didn't have time to work on in terms of audio descriptions and adverse event reporting. And there were some other opportunities that we could see but didn't get time to work on again in terms of reporting on drug-drug interactions, using these in patient forums, and you can read the rest as well as I can on there. But lots to be done in that area, I think, particularly as we're moving into the digital world and making things much more accessible to the patient. On the supply chain aspect, and this was led by Jag Shrai at Cambridge University, then we were looking at an end-to-end supply network design. And we were looking specifically to reduce inventory and to improve speed to market and to develop some new tools. And we've been remarkably successful in that. At GSK in Stevenage, we built a development demonstrator, a digital factory demonstrator with digital equipment and process analytics, which ran offline from the main system so that we could play as much as we wanted to. And the technology that we've developed in there is now being used in GSK's biggest selling product. And just a bit, we have to put this in for the government, but we created 83 new jobs and safeguarded 400 jobs in the process. This might be too small for people to read, but it's just to show that we were looking in the round at digital supply chains, the digital factory, which I've talked about earlier, the informed logistics, which come through the track and trace device, some of the work in terms of the automated clinical pharmacy, moving into monitored treatment through the apps. I'm not going to say too much about this, but one of the difficulties when you're trying to introduce new technology to manufacturing, apart from the challenge of getting past sunk cost in existing facilities is that we tend to look at it on a unit-by-unit basis. So instead of looking at continuous manufacturing and its impact on the whole supply chain, we look at the effectiveness at a micro level of continuous manufacturing operations. And that often gives you the wrong answer. So at Cambridge, we've developed a process which you can see highlighted in the picture, which takes it up a notch to the meso level, where you're able to plan this and project outcomes across the whole supply network, and even take that to the macro level in terms of observing phenomena in specific geographic areas over time. A really exciting piece of work. And we did plot out the whole of the GSK supply network doing this, with, I think, something like 2,850 nodes in it. So just to come back to what we achieved in this collaboration. So we started with collaboration in continuous manufacturing and crystallization, CMAC, fundamental science. We moved into mid-TRL. We've got some new techniques and new equipment. I've talked about the smart packaging. All of this is leading towards a better right first time capability. So the current effectiveness of manufacturing in both primary and secondary manufacturing is just above 3 sigma. And applying new technologies like continuous manufacturing can take this to 5 or even 6 sigma, bringing the yield improvements, but more importantly, the right first time. And again, a typical figure for a pharma company would be that we waste about £1 billion a year in not right first time manufacturing and reworking. So we looked at some improved process analytical technologies alongside these, and we worked very closely with the regulators, both with the MHRA here and with the FDA through a joint symposium that we run with MIT every 2 years, looking at continuous manufacturing. It isn't just about the technology, and it's very easy to get hooked into technology, but a collaborative program in this arena, and I've given Company X, contributed 6.4 million in kind, so there was no cash, it was in kind. They received 2.9 million back from the government, so a net cost of 3.5. That's not a bad deal, but they accessed 23 million pounds worth of programme work. So they had access to all of the outcomes across the whole programme. And that, I think, is a good return on a 3.5 million pounds investment. We shared the outcomes across the whole programme. I've mentioned regulatory. I don't think I need to say too much about that. But where do you go next? So it's great having fundamental research. It's great getting to translate some of that to a higher TRL and trial at a pilot level. But actually, we want to industrialize it. If we're going to get a return on that, then we really want to industrialize it. So, and Dave is going to talk in real detail about this in just a moment or two. Last year, we got funding for a medicines manufacturing innovation centre, which will be built here at Glasgow Airport. It's a £56 million project, and it's taking 2 programmes from REMEDIES as the first 2 grand challenges. So the continuous direct compression that I mentioned and the automated clinical pharmacy are now moving into MMIC to be industrialised. And I think that's the beauty of working collaboratively, and this is another collaboration which Dave will talk about. I think I've mentioned enough about the MHRA, so I can hand over to Dave, if that's okay.
Clive, thank you very much, and good afternoon and good morning. By way of introduction again, my name's Dave Tudor. I'm the newly appointed 10 weeks into being the Managing Director of this Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre. I work for the Centre for Processing Industries, which is part of the UK's High Value Manufacturing Catapult. Prior to that, I spent 27 years in manufacturing and strategy within the pharmaceutical sector. Clive has explained or described how collaboration between pharmaceutical companies, academics and the government can create new technology, create new ideas that can transform how we make and supply pharmaceutical products. He's then gone on to talk about the REMEDIES programme, which has helped in that translation of the technologies. What I'm going to talk to you about now in the next 10 or 15 minutes is about how we industrialise these technologies and actually bring them to adding real value. One of the questions that you may ask later on is that how come these exciting technologies are existing today, but yet as a sector, as an industry, there are only 4 tablets that are with patients today from continuous manufacturing? Why is it the transition into that commercial environment has been so difficult for the industry to take that big leap forward? And I'm going to come and talk a little bit about how this particular initiative, I hope, will solve some of those challenges. So it's one thing to think about when you've got new technology available to you, why you cannot translate that. But I'm going to start my talk with a little bit of the context, particularly focused in on the UK sector in terms of pharmaceutical manufacture, just to paint a picture of why it is such a compelling argument that we need to try and transform how we make and supply drugs today. So let me start here to say that in the UK, the most productive part of the UK economy is pharmaceutical exports. Today, the UK exports about £66 billion for a mere 40,000 employees in the UK. It is the most productive part of our economy. And the question has rightly been asked by government just now is to say, look, how can you protect that part of the economy? And even better, how can you make it continue to grow at the rates it's been growing at? And the reality is, one of the answers to that question is about, can you transform your technology? Clive has described that in the UK, we have this ability with these collaborations and partnerships to create the new technology, but our adoption of the new technology has been particularly poor. And so one of the things that came out of the UK Life Sciences Strategy that was led by Sir John Bell, and one of the things that also came out of the Scottish Government's Life Sciences Strategy were these challenges here to ask yourself the question, why can't we adopt our technologies to accelerate process development in the industry, absolutely drive process introduction in terms of translation into the commercial environment, drive a productivity gain in terms of operational excellence, and speed up to market. These things, these 4 goals, are really the holy grail of the manufacturing supply industry for the pharmaceutical sector. So that was the challenge that the government were asking, how can we possibly do that? And some of the answers to that question are in the bullet points here. So better design, better digital application, and we know that digital is a very exciting area just now. Can we come up with more flexible and modular design systems? And of course, Clive talked about continuous manufacturing, and he also mentioned in there about the fraction of a footprint, the fraction of a cost to build a continuous plant versus a big batch standard chemistry plant. Driving really fast efficiency into the production processes, and last but not least, asking yourself the question, how can the UK and how can the UK translate to globally accelerating this 8 to 10 year windows of getting a drug to the market? So some big challenges been laid out in that UK life sciences strategy. And really what that led to was this roadmap. I'm going to start on the far right-hand side, and certainly as the ex-head of manufacturing strategy for GlaxoSmithKline, this statement is really the holy grail. Can we honestly claim that we've got smart, read that, digital, demand-led commercial supply chains where we're making medicines that people really need and stratifying them? The regulators are on board with us, and we're actually making that medicine at a price that people can afford. If that's the end vision for the pharmaceutical sector, and let's face it, this sector needs to go through its transition. You could argue other sectors some decades ago have gone through that, like aerospace and automotive, but the pressures that Clive laid out on healthcare costs and challenging funding means that our sector has to go through this transition. In case anyone's not realised, that challenge has started. Over the last 5 years or so, the industry is changing, and it's one of the reasons why some of these collaborations have become much more exciting. Now, if I then spin us back down to the bottom here, there is no doubt, and I'm sure people on the call will challenge me in this, but we do have some companies with some very clever factories. So there are some unit operations, some parts of factories that are doing some very smart thing. Certainly within GlaxoSmithKline that was the case. But it was not universal, it wasn't translatable, and it was certainly localised in terms of its approach to the industry. So one of the challenges that I'm faced in the new MMIC, or the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre, is how can I help to get us onto this roadmap? Can I drive the sector to get into this digital predictive, flexible design, agile manufacturing with advanced technologies, and take that big leap forward to try and help the industry to translate and then hopefully gather that momentum to drive the sector forward. So in terms of the approach for doing that, it was born the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre. You'll have heard the word collaboration many times, but it is truly a collaboration. At this moment in time, we have two pharmaceutical companies, AstraZeneca and GlaxoSmithKline. We have funding from both the UK and the Scottish governments. We are in partnership with the University of Strathclyde as the lead academic research partner, and of course the Centre for Processing Industries, which is the organisation that I work for. So this collaboration is up and running and started. As Clive mentioned, it's a £56 million match-funded investment from industry to government to try and drive a change in the sector. I also want to make the point just now that when I talk about those individuals in the collaboration, we are looking to grow the collaboration. It would be remiss of me not to take this opportunity. We are in discussion at the moment with over 20 other companies, another 6 big pharmaceutical companies, to see whether they're going to come into the collaboration. And there's certainly some very positive vibes in that whole strategy. And so the mission was very, very clear for us. Can we take these technologies that exist in the UK, disruptive technologies, and can we translate them into a GMP environment, taking the regulator alongside with us, and showing the industry and leading the industry to make those changes? So, if that was the mission, then we looked at our initial scope, and certainly for this moment in time, certainly for the next 3 or 4 years, our focus very much is on small molecule packaging and labelling as we get down that supply chain. And the reason that's very, very important, I know I may get asked the question, why not biologics, why not vaccines, why not cell and gene therapy, all those, I'm allowed to say this, these interesting, sexy, new parts of the drug industry? Well, the answer to that question is really twofold. One, companies are doing that already. That's where the big investment strategies are just now. And secondly, the reality is we'll be lucky if 200 million people can afford those medicines for the next decade or plus beyond that. So the majority of the population are still going to be taking tablets, devices and capsules. And the reality is as well is that if you look at the installed base we have in the UK, about 70% of the installed base is on small molecule tablet manufacturing. And so when those organisations are looking to relife their plants or become more productive, then that's where we focused our technology at this time. The mission is to have this modular design, drive digital, bringing process analytical technologies or PAT along with that, driving into a real-time quality control. I'll talk more about that in a second, and making sure that we can integrate that into the supply chain. And last but not least is to drive the skills ecosystem. There's no point in the industry driving advanced technologies if we don't drive a skills strategy to be able to operate those technologies going forward. So let me talk about the first grand challenge. Grand challenge is the title we've given these things. We've chosen 2 grand challenges to deliver over the next 3 or 4 years. The first one is about enabling continuous direct completion. Clive talked about it earlier on. We are still bashing metal on metal today. We started that 100 years ago, and then 100 years later we're still bashing metal on metal to make our tablets today. For sure it's got more automated and there's more containment, and we've got a little bit better at that manufacturing process, but fundamentally we are still bashing metal on metal. As a result of that, we see a huge waste in terms of that expensive API. And so the strategy here is for us to try and design and optimize as mission number one, the most sophisticated continuous direct compression plant. That's part of the mission. We're going to be driving, as part of that, the introduction of a data digital twin. So one of the reasons why the sector has not adopted this technology just now is because when it comes to that drug development cycle and the scientists are sitting in front of the senior managers in the company, there's a debate that takes place. Will I develop my drug with the standard bashing metal on metal process that I know works, or will I take the risk and go into continuous direct compression? And the reality is, if you take that risk and it's not successful, then you lose that time, and therefore you lose time to market. And so one of the things that we are working through here, and we're well progressed on, is to create this digital data twin, driving analytical data from different APIs using different manufacturing equipment so that we can give a predictive tool for pharmaceutical companies to make that judgment in a much more safe and much more likelihood of success going forward. Coupled with that, we are going to be bringing the most advanced PAT into that continuous process in terms of how you make that tablet, in particular using CMAX capability to monitor how that crystal changes as it goes from being a free-flowing API into a compressed tablet, really analysing that data, showing that that transition is a very safe and consistent way, and then using that data in a clear digital strategy to allow us to go to real-time release. And that really speeds up the process in terms of velocity in the supply chain. So this is the first mission that we have. It's enabling continuous direct compression. You can see the 3 clear goals that we have there, and we are up and running, and currently we're partnering with the CMAC organisation that Clive introduced earlier to do the development milestones for this project. The second one Clive has introduced already. It's the just-in-time automated pharmacy. Let me elaborate on this a little bit. This is arguably one of the biggest wastes in the speed-to-market cycle that we see today. So we know that these drugs sit for about 4 years in the clinic. We know there's 4 different phases of clinical studies that need to take place, and therefore there's different manufacturing campaigns on that new drug coming through. And when we look at the manufacturing capability of our clinical plants today, they are still a little bit disconnected. They're very much built on vertical data vats, if you like, and therefore it makes the manufacturing process very sluggish and very inefficient. In fact, you'd be horrified to find just how many times a patient is left waiting on that clinical drug to come through to them. And so one of the things that we're doing here is we're taking the typical 9-unit operations of clinical manufacture, we're modifying those unit operations to make sure that they are fully digitised. We're driving a horizontal data strategy with real-time release to introduce real velocity into clinical manufacture. We think we can speed up the clinical manufacture rate by up to 30% by this approach and by this technology. This is an exciting place for breeders. There's a lot of interest in this particular project. The idea of taking 6 months to 8 months off the development cycle of a drug is a very attractive proposition to the industry. I won't say any more about these 2 particular grand challenges. Those are the ones that are on the table just now. But what I will say is that towards the end of June, I have to propose to the partners and to the government and to the industry what I think grand challenges number 3 and 4 could be. This is a mechanism where we see a sustained approach of disruptive technologies coming through, where MMIC can prove the capability in a GMP environment, and the industry partners can then lift that and translate it very safely and very quickly into their operations. In terms of the facility itself, I thought I'd spend just a few slides to explain. We're going to be located near Glasgow Airport, a highly connected site. AMID stands for the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation District. This is a €300 million investment just south of Glasgow Airport. In fact, for those people that land at that airport, as you're landing on your left-hand side, you would see the Doosan Babcock sign. It's right on that big field as we stand there. It's a very aggressive build. We're delighted that we're going to be co-located with the National Manufacturing for Institute on that land. And of course, this facility gives us fantastic accessibility to skills and it gives us a real opportunity for expansion and a close proximity to academics. In terms of the AMIDs, this is newly released pictures that come out this week. So this is a Technopolis district that's been created, and certainly our facility in MMIC will be sitting at the heart of that plant. This is just another picture here. You can see the MMIC facility down in this bottom left-hand corner, and there's lots of room for expansion for the supply chain companies to come in and be part of MMIC. And up here we have the National Manufacturing Institute for Scotland. The runway is where the blue writing is, for those Scottish people who are wondering where the runway is when I'm saying that. And this is some early design of the facility itself. MMIC will be a clean room capability. There'll be, in phase 1, 250 square metres of clean room capability, with clear conferencing and office space, with warehousing, utilities and service area for backup. The land that we have is 7 acres, and that gives us plenty of room and scope for expansion as we go forward. And this is just the most recent detailed design here, where you can see the 4 separate clean rooms coming there with the utilities and systems behind it, and the front end office area of MMIC. We should break ground in September. The facility will be construction complete in September 2020, and we intend to be live in that facility around about Q1 2021. In that meantime, the 2 grand challenges are out in a development phase with the University of Strathclyde for Grand Challenge 1, and we're using the National Formulation Centre for the Just-in-Time Automated Pharmacy project down in Sedgefield in the northeast of England. So with that, hopefully on time, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions along with Clive.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Dave. There's nothing online at the moment, but I would like to ask, obviously this is going out to other pharma across the world, and they may be interested in getting to know more about the investment directly, and they can contact you with us. But I was just wondering, do you have a kind of optimum number of partners that you're looking to come in?
No, that's a good question. Thanks, Alison. So I think we do. I mean, we're looking at 3 different types of partners just now. So there's other big pharmaceutical companies. We think comfortably there's space for 2 other companies to come in. We're not shutting the door at 4, but we think there is enough scope for 2 other companies to come in. I'm in quite detailed discussions with a number of big pharma companies just now, and there are certainly 2 companies just now who are very, very interested to come and join the collaboration, and we're working through those discussions live now as we speak. The second group of partners we think there's an opportunity is the CDMO partners that support the life sciences sector or the pharmaceutical sector, and we've identified 3 CDMOs who are well known to the big pharmaceutical companies, and we're in discussions with them. At this stage I can see that 2 of those CDMOs are very, very interested and at quite an advanced stage of coming to join that partnership. The third group, Alison, is more on technology providers, and on technology you have to think about automation control companies, equipment suppliers, and people with there are 2 companies with digital capabilities that have proven that capability in other sectors. So we have 6 other technology providers who are keen to come and join the collaboration, and again we're in quite advanced discussions with a number of them. So think of it as 3 separate buckets. We are open to the number we eventually have, but we're progressing that pretty well just now.
Some questions online right now. I've got a question. So the kind of efficiency savings in manufacturing. Is there anyone else in the world that's trying to do what you're doing at MMIC?
No, it's a good question. So, Clive, maybe if I start on that and then you can, is that okay? So, yep. So what I would say, I mapped out globally, before I left GSK as manufacturing strategy, I mapped out globally what was going on in terms of innovation centres. There are many research and innovation centres globally, but there is none, I don't think, that's got this level of collaboration, and there are none that are planning to do it in a GMP environment. I think the GMP environment makes it unique. We're planning to partner with the agencies to bring a license so companies can actually use this capability to make drugs that go into human beings. And I think that makes MMIC different to other centres that sit around the globe, as I see it. Clive?
True, it's the only GMP facility that I'm aware of that would work in that way. There are a number of incubators who work at the front end, the research end. So there's a PIPS program starting up in Singapore at the moment. There's the CSOPS program, which is running at Rutgers and Purdue in the USA. There's a program, SSPC, running in Ireland at the incubator size, all of which are kind of equivalent to CMAC, but each in its own different area. PIPS is on API, CMAC is on crystallization. The work in CSOPS is mainly around formulation. But none of them are GMP. And that's the big benefit of MMIC, along with the leverage that you get, of course, from the government funding this.
Can I ask a question about the government funding? So just now there's the industrial strategy, 4.2 billion. I mean, it's a shed load of money regardless of where you're sitting in the world. And so if companies were to come in and work with you, do they get any access to get match funding there if it's a novel piece of work that they're doing?
So, the way to think of this is in two different parts, Alison. So we've pitched to the UK and the Scottish Government that we think these two grand challenges will transform the industry. Clive talked about the return of investment. The return of investment for AstraZeneca and GSK is a very attractive return of investment in the business cases that they've got approved. And what the government have said that they will match the funding for those grand challenges. So if a partner wanted to join, then they can join that part of the collaboration. They can join for Grand Challenge 1 and 2. What I'll hopefully be announcing towards the middle of this year is Grand Challenge 3 and 4. And I can then go round another loop of government funding for those separate challenges. And I can invite companies to come and join them too. And that could be, AZ and GSK might decide they don't want to be part of number 3 and 4. But at the moment, they're saying yes to 1 and 2. So you're going to see this model where there might be different clusters of partners for different technology challenges. But for every technology challenge, for these two that I've described, the government have put their money on the table and the industry have to match that. And that's what's happened so far.
Can I say a couple of words about collaboration and funding? The industry used to work on a process of a relatively small budget within R&D for collaboration work. It might be, £10 million a year or something like that, but relatively small. What we're talking about now is completely different. This is not sponsoring some PhD students through their university course. This is getting engaged in broad, deep scientific programs that is delivering application in industry. And so if we go to GSK and AstraZeneca are both putting in £7 million over 5 years. So it's $1 million and a bit a year. But what they're looking to get as a return, probably after year 3, is £20 million per year. 10 million on continuous direct compression and at least 10 million on the automated clinical pharmacy. And I think that's a great return. And I think the industry needs, it's challenging. We're always cutting back in the pharma industry, trying to trim our costs to meet the challenge of the cost of medicines. But to do collaborative development, I think is a huge opportunity. And especially as many pharma companies now are not so interested in taking out patents or having intellectual property on manufacturing processes. They want that IP on the drug, but not the way it's manufactured. And so that gives us an opportunity to collaborate fairly openly and to share the costs and to have that sharing subsidized by the government.
Perhaps I can also say, I didn't say this in my presentation, but you may have heard me say twice about data strategy. So from a data strategy, the industry has not yet got her head round about data. And, you know, the big drug companies are using about 9 to 10% of the data they have available to them. So developing that data strategy and using that data in sophisticated modelling and then moving into applications is quite an attractive prize in how you operate your manufacturing and then your supply chain. And one of the things that both the Grand Challenges do is try to solve that data strategy as well as the technology. And that's quite an attractive side outcome, if I can call it that, particularly with the Jürgen Meyer review on smart manufacturing or smart factory. And certainly there is a pharmaceutical consortium that's looking to bid for some of that funding in Wave 3 Grand Challenge. And there is an expectation that MMIC has a role to play in showing, my intention is to be paperless, fully digital control, visualization, and that means that when partners come to see what we're doing in digital, they can also learn not just about the technologies, but how to apply digital in that manufacturing environment.
Okay, we've got a question here. That assuming your pathway does not stop at product supply, how can you better inform the medicines manufacturing process through patient experience?
It's a great question. You want to go first on that?
I'll go first,
okay,
if you don't mind. Just this very day, in fact, I've spoken to the principal, a vice-chancellor, if you want to call him that, of the university, and got approval to start what's called a Pharma 4.0 program, which will go all the way from manufacturing through distribution, through the use of diagnostics and devices, through monitoring patient adherence and improving patient adherence, to monitoring the patient, and hopefully through more targeted application of medicines, getting better patient outcomes. And certainly we'll be looking at feedback loops all the way along that supply chain, from starting material all the way to the patient outcome, including in clinical trials, not just in commercial. So, you know, can we learn something from the formulation in clinical trials that will allow us to go back and be more adaptable in the way that we formulate the product to get different doses and so on. So I think there's huge, huge opportunity if you think about that supply chain as a system, to have feedback loops from any place in that system into the manufacturing arena, or indeed into the way the patient takes their drugs.
I think, and I was going to add to this. So one of the questions that I've been asked, because I talk, both Clive and I have talked about the Grand Challenge too, which is just automated pharmacy. We've talked about the manufacturing section, but we know in clinical supply, the demand signal that comes into these plants is completely varied. Typically, you've got 50 clinical sites, international, getting that information collated and giving a clear signal is very challenging. And then once the product's made out that clinical plant, it can still take up to 4 or 5 months to get to the patient. Because the healthcare system, the distribution system to the pharmacy through the healthcare system takes very long. Meanwhile, these patients are actually suffering, in some cases dying. So one of the questions I've been asked is, can we take Grand Challenge 2 to a wider remit? Can we use some of the advanced digital data analytics to help the demand signal simplification? And can we also use the data to try and drive more efficiency in how that end of manufactured product gets into the patient in a much quicker way? So Innovate UK have asked that question, can we come up with a phase 2 of Grand Challenge 2 to make that patient cycle even faster than just the manufacturing bit that Clive and I have talked about today.
Excellent, excellent, that's great. I don't think there's any more questions that come through. I don't know if there's any more from the room. No, or if there's anything else you want to add.
No,
no?
Not for me, thank you.
If anyone
Okay.
wants information, then by all means contact Dave or I,
Yeah.
and we'll be happy to answer questions.
Okay, well on that we'll conclude. Thank you very much Dr Tudor, and thank you very much Professor Badman, and thank you all very much for attending. And as we say, you can get in touch with the guys directly, and you will also have this presentation that you can share with colleagues. Thank you very much. Goodbye.